Hey guys, what are your favorite or top three television shows?
Okay. I think this actually can say a lot about a person. Why don't you go first with at least one of yours? And then people can decide which of us has better, more refined taste.
Sure. Oh God, I mean, I'm gonna go really basic down the line, geeky. I'm gonna start up with Star Trek, broadly defined.
You're not gonna say which, like.
If I have to choose, I do mean broadly defined, but if I have to narrow it down for one, I would. God, people are gonna judge me. I'm gonna say Voyager, honestly.
Woo! Okay, why either that specifically or broadly does that stand out amongst all these other great TV shows? And what does it mean to you?
Star Trek for me. I mean, I think that Star Trek has been around such a long time and paints, such an optimistic, perhaps, vision for our future that really captured my imagination as a kid and continues, I think, to be. Or could be. The movies aren't doing a great job of this anymore, the modern ones, but could be or has been pretty provocative in terms of social issues and dealings with humanity and things like that. And so I kind of really liked the kind of rose-colored picture that Star Trek paints. In terms of Voyager, that's more just about, I don't know, I think it came at a time when I was able to understand a little bit more. I really liked superficially that the graphics were pretty cool graphics,
Yeah.
64-bit guys. But I like the storylines and the characters a lot. Who doesn't like Seven of Nine?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is an optimistic portrayal of the future, and when you see the future in TV and movies, it is not usually very optimistic.
Right.
The first one I'm going to say is, I'm going to take this before you can take it. I'm going to say Game of Thrones.
No.
And the reason being that Game of Thrones is not one of the first of like this new golden age of television shows, especially big expensive dramas on HBO. But I think it is one of the best in that it took something that 10 years ago people would have never believed would be popular, that I was reading and would have been mocked. I couldn't have even read it in public. Women would have cast their nose up at me. But they were able to portray it in a way that people forgot that they were seeing knights and dragons and swords and focused more on, oh shit, these are interesting conflicts and fully fleshed out characters in a world that is not cliched, that defies all of your expectations and can surprise you. And that was what made the books good, and the show has that too. It's getting beyond this sort of childish, I know people are going to hate this, childish Tolkien-esque view of fantasy, that there is good and there is evil, and showing, no, you can have a world like that with realistic motivations, shades of gray, and it can be awesome. And Emilia Clarke. Yeah.
You got me into Game of Thrones, and boy do I love it too. I think it is really cool. I really like that. One of the things that I like about it is I think that it sets a great precedent for how you should take a novel and turn it into a TV series or a movie. And I mean that by saying that I think that we have been trying to for the past in the past to take novels and turn them into movies, but I think we've shown with Game of Thrones that it makes much more sense to turn it into a television series.
You need the time.
What'd you say?
You need the time.
Yeah, you need the time to tell the story. I mean, imagine Harry Potter as a 7-year television series where you got to get in depth with all of the characters and not.
Well,
just
I think they did a good job with the movies.
I mean, they did do a great job, but just imagine, people love that stuff. So imagine being able to have,
It'd be cool.
7 hours of it a year instead of two and a half every 3 years.
Yeah. What's your number two?
Number two, I actually just had to pull my Netflix up to see what I've ranked top, and I'm gonna go with. There are several things up here, but I'm gonna go with a comedy and say Always Sunny.
Interesting. Why is that?
It's just, I think it's kind of our generation's. If you're in this mindset, I don't know. Seinfeld, in terms of being about nothing but kind of calling up these somewhat familiar situations and completely overdoing it in a way that kind of makes you laugh.
Familiar situations.
I mean, they're not really familiar situations, but sometimes just in terms of being broke or like trying to like, how do you deal with I don't know, loud neighbors or shit like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just really like this sort of situational comediness of it in a very modern.
Yeah. Well, I like that show as well. And it's going to sort of, I think I can talk about why I like that as I say mine, which is actually Seinfeld. And I think you're totally right. It's like the 90s was Seinfeld. The aughts is Sunny. God knows what we're going to have in the next decade.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this idea that you don't have to necessarily like the characters on a fundamental level. Like, they can be sort of bad people or vain people or overly emotional people, but if they're interesting people and if they get into interesting situations, it can still be a good show. And what I especially liked about Seinfeld is, even though it is still a laugh track comedy, it didn't want to be, and I think it was one step away from it, in that this is something that is full of witty dialogue that merits rewatching, that is clever and respects its audience. Maybe not as much as Sunny or some of the newer shows, but it did to the extent that it could in the 90s. And especially I liked that it, like, if I watch Friends now, especially the early seasons, it's just the comedy is so obvious.
Yeah.
And when you're supposed to laugh is so obvious, and you know what's going to happen with the plot. But Seinfeld, like with Curb Your Enthusiasm, has these multiple threads that you don't see how they're going to tie together, but they do at the end. And it's just very clever. And there weren't a lot of clever comedies in the 90s.
Yeah, Seinfeld was, I mean, we're a little young for it, but I definitely didn't get into it even when it was on, or even a couple years later. It's definitely something I kind of discovered in my mid to late 20s, and still haven't seen all the episodes. Like, I'll catch an episode on TV and be like, I've never seen this.
Yeah.
And get some inside joke people have been making for, 30 years.
Totally, yeah. What's your number 3?
Oh, man, I'm trying to decide over a lot of things.
I know, it's hard.
The last one's hard because it's like, no, I won't have any more. I'm going to go with... I was trying to think of just a different genre, but I think I'm just going to go with something I'm watching recently, which is House of Cards.
Interesting.
I really do like this show, man. It feels like, as much as it can be, and this is probably overstated, but a modern day Game of Thrones, just in terms of there being some bit of ruthlessness in political intrigue, and people do die, that you don't necessarily even expect to, kind of a thing. And so I really like that. Kevin Spacey, he's just amazing in it. And then Robin Wright is probably my favorite television actress at this point. Just the way I love her as Claire. It's so fucking good, man.
Yeah, that is a great show. I mean, there's not a lot of shows that can take, like, there are shows that are about politics technically, like Veep, but there's not a lot of shows that are really about politics that can make it interesting. And I mean, I'm not going to say that his motivations are necessarily as understandable as some of the Game of Thrones characters, but maybe they are. I mean, maybe that's what some politicians are like. And you're right, Robin Wright is amazing. I loved Kate Mara. I still am sad.
Don't know what you're talking about. Spoiler alert.
But yeah, no, it's a great show. I haven't watched the 3rd season yet, but at some point I will, and I did very much like it.
All right. What you got? Number 3.
Okay, really fast before I say my number 3, I want to say a couple of the ones, like I wish that I could include Married with Children. Yeah.
Okay,
Married with Children.
I'm
going to say Newsroom, even though I don't even really like it that much as a show, but I like what it occasionally was and what it could have been.
Yeah.
I liked this better look at how the news should have been done. That would have been cool. I'm so conflicted. Okay, here, you're not going to like this. And my last honorable mention is to House, which is a soap opera for men. I love it.
It's fine. I just didn't love it as much as you loved it. Just nonstop, this guy would talk about House. It's like, I think it's this disease.
I really like it. But no, my actual number 3 final one, I'm going to say, and this is very timely, is going to be The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which is, most people wouldn't think of that as a show that could be one of your favorite shows, but in the past 6 years or so, I haven't watched it nearly as much as I should, or I wish that I did. But every time that I've watched it, I've learned something about the country, about politics, about comedy, about journalism. I think that they have fundamentally changed not necessarily the way the news is always presented, but how a lot of people want to present the news for the better. I think that it has made the country better. I hope that Trevor Noah can do a good job of it, and it to some extent at least must have put me on my career path. And so yeah, Daily Show, number 3.
Yeah, I am pretty nervous about the new Daily Show guy, but I do hope it's going to be awesome. Like, it's just a lot.
Maybe it'll be better.
You know, maybe.
Doubt it.
3 honorable mentions for me.
Okay.
Battlestar Galactica.
I thought about that too.
Yeah, I feel like if you haven't seen this show, I don't even know if it holds up. Sometimes I feel like you've seen it.
I think so.
It does.
I've rewatched it.
Okay, if you haven't seen this show and you're a geek, but you think it sounds too geeky, I'm one of those geeks, just go watch it. It's fucking awesome, and you're going to get into it the same way you got into Game of Thrones.
It's the sci-fi Game of Thrones. It's not as geeky as you think it is.
Yeah, agreed.
In fact, it could have been geekier.
Yeah,
I would have liked it to be geekier.
It could have been geekier.
But it was good.
You're like, wow, but how does the technology work?
Yeah.
Okay. Black Mirror. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't watched it.
It's on Netflix. It's kind of just come on Netflix, I think, last year. But it's sort of like
Outer
Limits, Twilight Zone, kind of a show, but it's pretty modern, and it has a lot to do with kind of technology and advancing civilization. Love it, watch it. And
it's on Netflix, right?
It's on Netflix, and then
okay, I should watch it.
They should sponsor us. And then the last one is 4400. Which I don't know if this holds up. I haven't watched it in a while, but just in terms of what is my favorite, I loved watching the show. It was on USA, which, you know, kind of puts it down a couple of notches in my book at least. But it's this really cool show about 4,400 people who get taken from Earth over a 50-year period. So it's not like all at once. It's just people who have been disappearing, and then all at once they all show back up, and most of them have like superpowers basically, and society has to kind of figure out what to do with it.
That is pretty cool.
It's great.
It's kind of like I've been watching The Leftovers. Where it's
yeah,
and that hasn't really made good on its promise yet.
Yeah. Nothing.
Yeah.
I've tried to watch that too, and nothing sort of.
Nothing happens.
Yeah, it's like, are we ever
It
going to
could
find
get
out
good.
anything? Exactly.
No, he's been sort of clear that you're not gonna
Ever find
You're not
going to
figure out
It's
anything.
just
Yeah.
about having that feeling.
Yeah.
Fuck your.
Yeah, I noticed neither of us put Walking Dead on there, even though I've watched a billion episodes.
That Heroes.
Maybe the new one will be good. Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah, maybe the new Heroes will be good.
Yeah, I mean, dude, the first bit of Heroes, I want to rewatch just the first season. I might do that.
I really hope that they figure out, and I hope Game of Thrones teaches this too, back to that point, is that if you are going to make a television show, like, think about its longevity, you know? Like, don't just give us a great season and then 3 seasons later we're fucking wandering through the woods trying to find the lost dinosaurs.
I mean, the coolest thing about it was with every story arc, you got to play the game of, wait, which X-Men arc are they ripping off right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So did you say your final favorite show?
Yeah, it was Daily Show.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's now off the air. In my mind.
Well,
anyway. Oh, yeah, those are good questions.
That's
where
all
could
I got.
Where could people send in more questions?
People
Quay?
could send in more questions to our Twitter at PodcastMen. We're also on Facebook, just Man to Man Podcast.
Yeah.
And we got websites and stuff, but that'll be in the notes or something.
Yeah, there you go. And if people are listening to this one, this edition of the Man to Man Podcast, and they want to hear more, they can still go to themanthropologist.net/podcast, right?
Correct. Or
cool.
themantomanpodcast.com/podcast.
There you go. Either one. Just start typing stuff.
There's
You'll
a lot
probably
of
end
ways
up
to
there.
find us.
Yeah.
All right. Later.
Okay, thanks.